Hey guys, I'm gonna try to make a video pretty much every day about something, and today's video is going to be definitely about travel times. People on Mizahar don't really get what it takes to travel. Now, it might not be your fault. Um, I just have a feeling that a lot of people haven't spent a lot of time out in the woods. Now, Um, looking at me, you wouldn't think I spent a lot of time out in the woods, but trust me, about between 96 and about 2000, I spent 4 years basically just solidly camping in the woods. And what I did was survey streams for a private industry company, a timber company, and it's kind of a complicated thing. Actually, I can probably describe it fairly quickly. They have what we would consider streams on their lands, and they went from class 1 to class 5. Now, class 1 is like a river and has a tremendous amount of flow. Class 5 is an effluvial, it means it's only flowing part of the year. It's the little tiny puddle in their backyard that tends to dry up for most of the year and is only flowing during high water, like rainy season. So basically, in I want to say 96, the Salish Kootenai Indian tribe did a study that stated that class 3 or class 4 streams, which the difference between classifications were class 1 is usually navigable and it always had presence of salmonids, which are salmon, trout, that kind of thing. Class 2, presence of salmonids, um, maybe not navigable. 3, unnavigable, but presence of salmonids. Class 4, no presence of salmonids. Class 5, effluvials. Okay, so depending upon what the stream classification was, timber companies could harvest timber up to a certain point called the buffer zone on either side of the creek. Now, and yeah, I say creek. I know that's not technically correct, but I've always used that term, mainly because part of my family came from Missouri, and they always said creek, and I lived with them for quite a while. Anyways, that's a different story. So, if you can harvest timber, basically a class 3 had a 50-foot buffer zone on one side of the creek, so like the total buffer zone was 100 feet. Class 4s had a 25-foot buffer zone on either side of the creek, so that was 50 feet on either side, which if you're a timber company and you miss big huge logs or big huge trees that are growing next to a creek because of a buffer zone that you have to leave to keep the temperature of the creek down, so basically keep it shaded for the salmon, then you have an issue. Okay, so the Salish Kootenai tribe, you're losing a lot of money. That's the issue. So the Salish Kootenai tribe in Montana did a study, and their study found out that something like 94% of class 4 streams had salmonid present in them. And so the federal government made an emergency ruling where they reclassified all 4s as 3s unless they were surveyed by an actual physical biologist who went up and determined whether or not salmonids were present or absent. So I originally got hired on for a timber company to survey all their creeks to find out whether salmon were present or absent. So I had the electroshocker, and I just hiked up the creek and sampled for fish all day long, 24/7, 7 days a week. And I had a list of streams, and I had to get them done, and it took like 4 years. But I did a lot of other studies in the meantime. That was just like my main project. And I spent a lot of time hiking in the woods. I lived in the woods. I ate in the woods. We didn't even have to pack food because we were in Washington State and food is abundant in the woods. And if you got too hungry, you just turn the electroshocker way up. and you always had fish for dinner. I shouldn't say that, but it's true. All the biologists do this. So, anyways, yeah. So hiking in the woods. What does this have to do with travel times in Mizahar? Basically, if you don't have a trail through the woods, hiking in the woods is a bitch. Can I say that on the video? Yeah, I probably can. You slog through swamps. You press your way through, at least out here, vine maple, a lot of vine maple, blackberries, stinging nettles, these really cool plants called devil's club. If you think about a stalk of rhubarb, they kind of look like rhubarb, but they're ginormous. Like, you can walk underneath of them. They're so big. They look like they're prehistoric, and they actually are. But out of the stems grow these huge thorns, and they stick in your skin, and you can't pull them out. You can't even pull them out with pliers. You gotta let them fester out, and it sucks. And Native Americans around here used to make clubs out of them and use them as weapons, and so they were called devil's clubs. So you run into that all the time. Poison oak, poison ivy. You have to hike up drainages, hike down drainages. It's not an easy thing. Like, on a good day, when I was doing stream survey work, I could maybe do 3 miles of creek. And that's walking in a creek which is fairly open. So when you talk about walking from Ravik to, say, Siluris through the woods, you're not going to do it in a season. This is like 1,000 miles plus. It's a lot of space. And it's not flat. And it's not like you're just walking through like New England woods or like the redwoods with open undergrowth. You're talking about wild places. And along with just the terrain, you have then the predators and then the accidents that you can have. Hiking isn't the easiest thing in the world to do, and it's very easy to fall down a hill. It's very easy to twist an ankle. It's very easy to trip over a rock that you didn't even know was there. You fall through things all the time. There's sinkholes out in the woods. I mean, there's wolves and bears, and out here in Washington, we have wolves now, which is pretty cool. I was in on the reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone, but actually I didn't actually work on that one. I worked on the South Central Idaho hard release, and we snuck them in the middle of the night and let them go. And now they're in Washington. Those are the same wolves, or the descendants of the wolves that we let go in Idaho. Now they're in Washington. It's so cool. Now they're shooting them. And I'm getting messages from defenders of the wildlife about how awful it is that people are shooting wolves in Washington. And every time I see one of their freaky messages, I'm like, do you know how cool it is that there are wolves in Washington to shoot? And now that they're here, there will always be more of them because they reproduce incredibly quickly, and they're hugely efficient predators. And anyways, there's wolves. Now, if I'm out hiking in the wilderness, I'm telling you right now, I'm not as afraid of wolves or bears as I am with cougars. There's only one thing in the woods that scares me. I can deal with wolves. I can deal with super mean things. Like, I had a friend of mine that was doing pine marten surveys, and she had her nose ripped off by a pine marten. And if you look at a pine marten, if you've never seen a pine marten, first of all, it's the cutest thing in the world. It is literally, like, you think red pandas are cute, pine martens are just as adorable, except they're tiny, and they're not as fluffy, fuzzy, but they're all over out here. And she had her nose ripped off by one, literally. It was horrifying. It was like the worst graphic accident I've ever seen. So, like, I'm not even afraid of pine martens, even though they've ripped people's noses off. I'm really, really afraid of cougars. I actually shot a cougar once. I walked out of my house when I lived in a fairly residential area, actually, but it was bordered by woods. And we had a little travel trailer that belonged to my landlord that was parked right next to the front door. I let the dogs out the back. They ran around the front for some reason, so I walked out the front to see what was going on. And the dogs, which were really tame, had their hackles all up, and they were like, "Hurr," and I'm like, what's going on? What is that? And I looked over, and there's a big, huge cougar sitting on top of the travel trailer, just stretched out, gonna eat me. It was gonna eat me. And my neighbor, who lived about 20 feet away, it was just two of us girls living on 8 acres of property. And she had a 4-year-old. And all I could think of is, if that cat is that bold during the day or at night, what's it going to be like during the day when there's a 4-year-old out in the yard playing on her tricycle, or with the ball or whatever she used to do out there. So I walked back in the house really carefully, and since I have guns all over my house, I grabbed one, and you know what happened. So yeah, I'm terrified of cougars in the wild. Absolutely. You don't know where they are. You don't know when one's going to hit you, and they will do way worse than a pine marten. They'll eat your face. I've actually been out riding with people before, horseback in the wilderness, and we've had cougars attack our horses while we were on them riding, and it was no fun. And we've actually had to put a horse down in the woods because of a cougar attack. So if you're in Western Washington, it's the most beautiful place in the world to live, but cougars are a problem. They're a really big problem, and they're in all sorts of residential areas now. So mainly because people are dispersing out of cities and moving into places that were formerly wilderness. But anyways, I'm like getting completely off kilter of what I was talking about. Travel in Mizahar. It's not easy. If you don't have a road, you're going to take quite a while. And half of the wilderness that you're going to be going through, you can't even ride horses through. So unless there's elk trails or deer trails that you can ride on, and they won't ever go in a straight line. They'll wander up one drainage, down another drainage. They'll go from food source to food source. So it's not even like it's a straight shot travel, and it's not even like you can actually, go from one place to another easily. So Ravik to Siluris, not an easy shot. Basically, the only places that you can go quickly are places that have roads. Zeltiva to Siluris, Siluris south to Kanash and Riverfall, and that's about it. If you can sail someplace, take a boat. It's way safer and it's a lot faster. If it's the appropriate season. So, basically, we have a big project going on. If you want to help, you're welcome to. I'm going to try to get it started back up again here soon. And I'm going to guesstimate how long it's going to take for a person walking and a person riding to get from city to city based on the terrain in the wilderness and the season. And it should be fairly straightforward, and it will help out a considerable amount because while Liminal's distance chart is amazing, it's not helpful in terms of determining travel because travel is never as the crow flies, and it's never X amount of miles per hour times miles per hour or whatever you guys do these complicated formulas to figure out. Basically, I'm just going to have to look at them and say, okay, a person walking based on the distance between Siluris and Zeltiva, which, by the way, is 15 days if you are galloping a horse and changing a horse every day. And it's not even like every day. It would have to be like you'd have to change your horse a couple times a day probably to maintain that speed and get there. If you're just riding a horse, it's probably 30 days. If you're in a caravan, which moves extremely slow, wagons are a lot slower than actual horseback riders. People can walk faster than wagons can run. Then, what if you run on a roll? Then that's the way you need to figure things out. And you're not going to take a wagon. You're not going to take a big string of horses with a lot of possessions between, say, Ravik and Siluris. You're going to be able to take a wagon anywhere in Andricus or Cyprus because the Sea of Grass is very easy to traverse. You can actually almost go as the crow flies on the sea of grass. And actually, if you want to, I should stop saying actually so much, but right now, Cyprus is probably one of the safest places to be in. And I say that because the Jed storm took out not only a lot of Dreykus, but it took out a lot of glass beaks. It took out a lot of the predators that are normally out and about on Cyprus. They don't have a lot of cover. So when that whole thing happened, it decimated populations all over the place. So if you want to just casually walk through Cyprus, you're more than welcome to. And you're probably not going to be as in serious danger as you normally would be, with some of the populations being at full strength or not having suffered this storm that happened that killed a lot of people. There's also, however, some things that were altered by the storm. So if you're wandering through the sea of grass, it's very possible to come up on wild Jed pools or, like the super buff Akalak Yuckman that Mist came up with when he was doing his quest, which I hope will get finished, but I have my doubts. So, yeah, Cyprus. Come to Cyprus. It's pretty safe right now. And this is my rambling video. It's almost 20 minutes now, or 16 minutes, so I can't count. I can, but I just don't want to try at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'm going to end this video, and hopefully you'll have a better understanding of travel times and why Jen says, take a boat. It's easy. Bribe a Sephra. Have them take you. They'll gladly take anybody anywhere for a little bit of metal or, a weapon or some armor or some cold hard Mises. All right. So everybody have a good day. Bye.